how could we be so wrong about reality over here? I mean, we're idiots. Why are we idiots over here? I mean, why is your side so significantly far ahead of ours? I mean, do you know where, like, was there an era or some events where there was like a clear delineation of where our progress is split? That could be hard to pinpoint. There are a couple things I could point to that are striking in how essentially, without anything changing, everything changed. What does that mean? I mean, everything changed, but nothing changed? I can think of two events where the only thing that really changed was our perception. So the first one would be this trial. I believe it was the Stillman case. Stillman, I don't remember her first name, but she was very sharp. I think she was perhaps in academia or maybe some sort of scientist. Anyways, she was accused of murder. Murder? Yeah, and 99% of the evidence against her was circumstantial, but they did find her fingerprint on the murder weapon. That'll do it. Usually, right? And she got away with it? Well, it turned out that the fingerprint was of a section that was a good match, so there was nothing showing that there was not a match, but it was not a full fingerprint. So like a partial? It was a good partial. It was almost complete, yeah. And now she defended herself. Oh, that's a horrible idea. They say not to do that. Yeah, well, she was very intelligent and very quick, and she had legal support, behind her, so... But anyway, the prosecution had a forensic expert and a fingerprint expert, and they both gave expert testimony. But then, Stillman could cross-examine them. And she asked them, yes or no, do you know if fingerprints are unique? And their answers were pretty surprising. Neither could simply say yes or no. But they did answer the same way, which was, as far as we know, yes, they are. That's interesting. Well, it turned out that that was not the way to answer this question. Why? What happened? Well, she asked a bunch of questions. One of them was, what's the average area of a fingerprint, right? And it turns out quite small. The bit of real estate at the tip of your finger is pretty tiny. Then she asked how many distinct patterns there were for humans throughout time. Turns out there aren't many. Loops, swirls, arches. And then she asked, how are fingerprints expressed? Expressed? How they are formed. They are formed by arbitrary actions of an early fetus, like how they move and what they touch, among other physical experiences of being a fetus. But importantly, it's only the actions that occur within a 7-week period. But essentially, they are created randomly. Randomly? Yeah, but it's a finite randomness, right? So there are limits. Most obviously is the very small amount of space they cover. Also, given that these movements only appear to create patterns within a small scope, like loops and whirls and arches, that in and of itself precludes that small space to contain, say, a McDonald's logo or the depiction of an F-16 fighter jet. Right, of course, yeah. So literally anything can't just be there. There's restrictions. Right. And these restrictions, combined with a small amount of space, narrow down the possible designs from a very large number down to a very small number. Right. So she made an observation that was essentially, if it is based on the experiences over a finite amount of time, then there's no linkage or tracking of designs from one fetus to another or across mothers, related or not. No, of course not. Right. So then she asked to each of them, they were examined separately, of course. Right. If they knew of any existing phenomena that would prohibit two fingerprints from being unique. And they said no. Of course. Then she asked if fingerprints were formed randomly. They said yes. Oh. So then she went back over the conclusions. Small amount of real estate, limited possible pattern formats, no interorganism conformity. What's that again? Hold on. And they are randomly formed. Interorganism conformity, babies being formed have no information about other babies already formed, being formed, or to be formed all over the world, all throughout time. Oh, right, yeah. So then she asked them a question about possibilities and randomness. And then she went in for the Neil deGrasse. If you were blind and you were listening to science books on tape and listening to all the biological facts about how fingerprints are formed, their dimensions, etc., if that is your only knowledge and you've never seen a fingerprint, you've never scanned one, compared any, and no one has ever told you any more about them, and someone came up to you and said, is it possible, all right, possible that everyone in the world could have the same fingerprints? Just, is it permissible within scientific theory and math theory? What did they answer? Yes. What? Everyone? Yeah. If something is truly random, regardless if the possibilities are infinite or not, which in this case they're not, random and unique are not equivalent, right? Random permits it. Unique does not. But unique requires governance. It requires a mechanism to say, we just had this pattern over here in Rio de Janeiro, and this pattern here was used in Greece 300 years ago. But, okay, so this pattern here, this is good. That governance doesn't exist. Right, but everyone? Well, in theory, it is permitted, right? There's nothing prohibiting it. But obviously that's not probable. Oh, okay, yeah. In reality, there's no way to know if any match, or if they do, how common it is, until we actually compare them all. And that result is instantly invalidated as soon as someone's born. See, it's not a formula, right? It's not an interconnected mechanism. Yeah, I totally get that. So my fingerprints might not be unique. Right. Man, that's like all I had going for me. So at the time, we had only scanned less than 1% of the population, let alone billions of people and trillions of fingers that have come before. Would it be true if the area of the fingerprint were larger? No. I mean, sure, they are more limited because, for us, they're maybe only 1.5 square centibezos. But when centibezos? What the heck is that? Oh, right. You guys are imperial here, not metric. Okay. There's the centimeter, but what's a centibezos? Oh, yeah. Well, Amazon is a bit farther ahead on our side. Okay. That's hilarious. That's the corporate takeover of the world, I guess. Yeah. Well, there was some pushback, but, once it was all implemented and complete, I gotta admit, it's pretty prime. So what happened in the case, the lady in the fingerprint? She was found not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Really? Yeah. Well, most people, including myself, thought she was probably guilty. The more fractious thing that came out of all of this was a wave of outrage at what appeared to be general unsoundness of forensic science, of science in general. But, by that time, there was millions of people in jail. And this crisis of credibility spread to other things, right? It was really a scientific awakening, mainly on the communication front, but the forensic awakening, it just devastated the judicial system at the time. Wow, I bet. But what do you mean on the communication front? Well, much of the science was essentially correct, but it was poorly communicated and disseminated. And this caused a much larger erroneous body of pseudoscience to be formed and used in the real world. We were certain of much less than was being utilized in court. You might say weaponized, but I don't want to get into mind reading. Right. I'm sure there were lots of people that had good intentions, but didn't understand that they were deforming science into what they needed in that moment.